What's up, everybody? I'm Sam Dwenger, and today I'm going to talk to you about design fiction. Now, what is design fiction? Well, according to our textbook, design fiction employs speculative products and prototypes to anticipate future trends. Now, another definition I found that I actually like a little bit better is design fiction is a way to envision new technologies in the distant future while utilizing narrative to show how these technologies are positioned within a new context. Now, when a lot of people think of design fiction, we simply think of design fiction as making prototypes of things that could possibly come about in the future. But design fiction is actually so much more than that. And the whole world of design fiction involves a lot of different things. Some that we've talked about in class, specifically speculative design. Now, speculative design is kind of like design fiction in the way that it looks towards the future, but design fiction looks towards the distant future. So we're trying to speculate years upon years in advance to kind of trigger someone's thoughts on the process and really get someone thinking about the direction our society is heading. While speculative design is more near future thinking, and we're basing that off current technological developments that we have. Now, critical design is another thing we talk about, but critical design, more than anything else, is more of a way of thinking about things. So it employs both speculative and fictional design in the way that we are making something, but it's less about the product that we're making and what we're trying to say with the product. And then scenario planning is something we talk about. It's a way of thinking about the future, and basically design fiction is scenario planning on steroids. It's scenario planning blown up. And scenarios are also kind of like speculative design in that they're based on like common day or near future. And then down here we see a nice critical design and like speculative design. You have a lighter that's slowly growing a tumor. So as you smoke more, the tumor grows bigger and bigger, and that's kind of just a way of thinking about it. And the speculative design is just kind of a way of showing that. And then Anthony Dunn basically invented design fiction back in 2005. That's a book he wrote about it called Speculative Everything. Now, what we think about when planning and like what designers actually think about when going about design fiction, we think about like what they're going through in their head in coming up with these concepts and ideas. So by making inferences from our current society, including trends, clothing, transport, architecture, etc., basically every aspect of our society, we're able to speculate and kind of make assumptions on what our future society will be. So one thing we think about with design is context. Now, context is, of course, defined as the circumstances that form the setting for an event, statement, or idea in terms of which can be fully understood and assessed by your audience. Now, the context of the situation, when designers are coming up with design fiction or coming up with prototypes, they have to think about what context, what kind of future are we setting this prototype in, and why would it make sense for that prototype to appear in that future. And then the narrative is the spoken or written account of connected events. So it's basically a story, and it's what you're applying to that situation for why that prototype would be there. Now, when designers kind of go about these two things and thinking about this, they emulate either two things. They either emulate vibrant technological futures, or some represent darker futures, basically utopian or dystopian futures. Two examples I really like from that are the recent movie Passengers, and then it's a little bit older movie. Some of you hopefully have seen it. It's called Idiocracy. Now, Passengers is based on a utopian future where they set aboard this very advanced technological spaceship in order to go to another world and hopefully inhabit a new world because Earth is running out of space. And so they designed this technological spaceship that's going to take them years and years and years to travel there. And we really see the designers kind of coming up with a concept, a starship that could travel light years on light years and support somebody for that long. And it's really just interesting how it captures the eye and just the technological advancements you can see and how futuristic it looks. It really just screams utopian, it screams technological advancements. And then when we look over here for the Idiocracy poster, Idiocracy is kind of a really stupid movie, I'm not going to lie, where the whole thing is based on a future where the intelligent people of the world could not reproduce, And so the unintelligent people of the world kept reproducing, and as natural selection went on and generations went on, people got dumber and dumber and dumber. And the narrative for this is they have an ex-Marine who's put into a tube, a cryo tube for cryo sleep, and they're supposed to wake him up like 10 years later, but the experiment's forgotten about, and it goes 500 years, and he wakes up in this society where everything is just trashed, and you can clearly tell this is a dystopian future. Two things I really like about this is they incorporate both context. They set basically the stage and the plot for where we're going with our design and why the design is there, and then both of them have unique storylines. In that, of course, Passengers is Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt's movie where he and his female co-star wake up early when they're supposed to be in cryo sleep on this, traveling to a new world, and they basically have to live that out. And then so you have context and narrative being thought about in both of these designs. And in both of these movies, they have multiple objects and different design prototypes that they incorporate into the movie, and it really makes the viewer think about the distant future. Now, design fiction is everywhere, not only in those two movies, but also just in things we've seen everywhere. Blade Runner, one of the older movies with Harrison Ford, talks about a dystopian future. And here we can see one of the cars from the 2049 remake of Blade Runner. And here we see the movie poster. The person who designed this poster had context and a whole narrative to go off of in thinking about how to create this poster and send the message that we're trying to send. So, Blade Runner is obviously a dystopian future, and so it has darker buildings, kind of a menacing look to it. You have Harrison Ford with the light shining on him, a lot of dark colors being used. And then down here, we have kind of a fancy flying car from the 2049 Blade Runner, but also just kind of the dark image, and then the floating car to give you the futuristic look. And then over here we have a really popular recent movie called WALL-E. Hopefully most of you have seen WALL-E and know the storyline behind it. But essentially, WALL-E's a little robot, and he's visited by Eve, which is the technological robot, and humans have left Earth on this spaceship hoping that they can inhabit a new world or come back to Earth when the planet is fixed. And here we see design fiction being taken on the ship in their chairs, and it's you can clearly tell a message is trying to be sent with WALL-E. One, with all the trash on Earth that we see in the opening scenes, it's obviously depicting a future where we have trashed the Earth and we have to move on, and so it's trying to send the message of change. And then here we see our laziness, how we're so obsessed with screens, and you can clearly tell when the designer's thinking about this, they're looking at current day society, how we're so obsessed with our screens, and they're trying to say something. When we look at examples of actual prototypes that are taking place in today, recently in 2015, the Back to the Future franchise, that was the year they were supposed to come back, and so Nike did a play on a design fiction that they had in that movie, which was, of course, the Nike Mag self-tying shoes. They brought those back, and those are currently being produced today. So that's an example of design fiction actually coming true in today's society. And then in 2011, most of you probably remember this, Google released Google Glass, which is supposed to be a wearable technology that you can talk to and you can slide through. And if you guys didn't know, when Google Glass came out, it was a big disappointment because they were prototypes originally and they couldn't do nearly anything that the Google designers said they were going to be able of doing. But they actually relaunched in 2018 and they weren't really popular. So this is kind of a design fiction that didn't really come to be, because we don't see people walking around with these nowadays, 8 years later down the line. Why does design fiction work? Design fiction works because of the possible world theory, and that just states that a piece of fiction can be understood by an audience while exploring possible worlds that might not be so easy to grasp in their present reality. And so as you guys can see, design fiction is everywhere in our society, and thank you for your time.